Hello friends, in this video we'll learn how to install the Postgresql 11 from a precompiled package. We are making the installation on our server that uses the Ubuntu server version 18.04 and we are using the JDK 8. The first step is that we need to update our packages. Okay, update have been done. The second thing, we need to do two packages actually, which are these ones, prior to make the installation of the Postgresql. Now this package will add the package of the pgcrypt2 in case you wish to make any encryption of your database later on. Then you need this package because, as I said, it will add the pgcrypt2 encryption package. This one we will use it just to know to use this code, which will tell us about the version of our Postgres. Okay, they are already installed. Now let's start the installation of the Postgresql. Okay, as you see here, the installation have been completed. Now you need to notice one thing, and that is this, which is here. Now since we are doing the installation of a precompiled package, that means the package manager is handling the entire installation process, which means the package manager have give us two things. Number one, he gave us a default user by the name of Postgres and a default database by the name also of Postgres. And this package manager gave us a cluster, the cluster which contains all the databases inside it. This cluster name or available in this directory, main. This is the directory name is main. So all the databases of this cluster will reside in this directory, and it is owned by this user, the Postgres user, the default user. So this directory, which is the cluster that contains all the databases, is owned by this default user, which was given to us by the package manager. Okay, now the installation have been completed. All the configuration have been done in this directory, and all the data and the cluster have been created in this directory. So now if we want to start the server, let's see what will happen. So let's use this code. And we try to run it. You see, it says permission denied. Why is that? Why the permission is denied? Why can't we run the server? And the issue here is, if you see, as we said, that this cluster, now we are trying to run this cluster, right? But this cluster is owned by only Postgres. It's not owned by this sudo user. So this user cannot access to this cluster because there are two different users, and we said each user on the server should have its own cluster. And to prove to you that, let's say in here let's see who's the owner actually of this cluster. So if we do ls-lh, as you can see here, this is the directory, the cluster directory, the data directory, the main directory, which is owned by Postgres actually. It is not owned by the user, by this user. The server could have many users. Each user should have its own cluster. Now this default user owns this data directory, owns this cluster. This pseudo user does not own this cluster, so it cannot access to it. So the way to access to this cluster is by doing sudo -u postgres psql. In this way we can access to this server and through it to the directory of the cluster of the databases, which is owned by the default user Postgres. As you can see here, now we have run our database normally. Now if you look to the content of this directory, we see here that we have the default database and we have the default user. So far we don't have anything else. This is the cluster as it is, as it has been formatted from the beginning when we by the package manager. So we just have this default database and default user, and this user owns this cluster. Okay, so now let's create the some databases. So from this Postgres we will create a database. Create database. Let's give it a name by new DB, suppose. Okay, database created. Let's move and work on this new database. So we exit from Postgres database and we work on the new database. Okay, now we are connected to the new database. Notice one thing, that this new database now is still under the Postgres user, under the Postgres default user. So it's owned by this user. And we will see how we can change the ownership of this new database to another user. Next thing, we need to create a role. Now, first thing to tell you about the roles. In PostgreSQL, there is no distinction between role, user, group. They're all the same. Except for the role and the user. The role you should assign that it is can log in, while the user by default it can log in. And I will show you what's the meaning of it. So, create role. Give it a name, admin group, let's say, with create DB, create role, login, encrypted, password, some password, let's say. So here we are creating a role, and the role name is admin group with create DB. Now, when you see with create DB and create role, that means this role is given a high level of administration. It's not a super user. The super user could do anything. Super user just like the Postgres, but now we are giving this role a high privileges. It can create DB, it can delete DB, create a role, delete a role. So this role, admin group, has a high privileges, and it is encrypted and with this password. Oh, sorry. Create. No. Okay, role created. Now we need to move the ownership of this database, the new database, to this role, to the admin role. Before it was owned by the default user Postgres. Now we need to change the ownership of this database to this new role. So, and the way to do that is alter database owner to admin group. Alter database, and you need to name it, of course, new DB. Alter database new DB owner to admin group. Now the ownership of this new database have been transferred to admin group. Postgres is no more owner of this database. Now the owner is admin group. Now in this database we will create schemas. We will create two schemas. So create schema, the first one by the name of login, and the second one by the name of users. Two schemas have been created. Now, just in case, if the owner of this schemas is not admin group, then again we can change and alter the owner of this schemas. And the way to do that is pretty simple, and I believe you can figure it out. Alter schema login owner to admin group. As I said, this is if the owner of this login schema is not owned by the admin group. And the same thing you can do with the users schema. Now we have created a database. We have created a new database actually, and we created a new role, and we moved the ownership of that database to the new role. Then we created some schemas. This is the basic installation that you need for a database on a server, and how you can make it work. And if you can see now the content of this database, so this is the database and it's owned by this role, and this is the default database and with the owned by the default user. In the next video we'll start talking about the permissions that we can give to the roles in this database. Thank you very much.